my mind. Yeah, maybe we can find a bus schedule or something.
Come on, you're not gonna back out now. Not in front of the lady.
Okay, yeah, sure.
All right, that's the spirit.
You're sure you're up for this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like we're just hurling ourselves off a mountain or something. Right?
Actually, that was pretty much my entire plan.
What?
Oh, don't worry, Blue. It's in your DNA. You flap your right wing, you flap your left wing, and together, you fly.
But this doesn't seem aerodynamically possible.
Yeah, you think too much. Flying is not what you think up here. It's what you feel in here. And when you feel the rhythm of your heart, it's like samba. You fly. See, it's easy.
Easy? Easy for you to say, because from here, it looks really, really hard.
Hey, if you want to see Linda again, this is the only way.
Okay, you're right.
Yes, I am.
This is for Linda.
Right.
Keep it simple.
Easy breezy.
Thrust, lift, drag.
Oh, come on, let's
Whoa,
go.
wait.
Inside, outside, inside, outside,
inside,
inside,
outside,
outside. Come
inside.
on, Blue, you can do it.
I can do it. I can do it. I can do it. I can do it.
Not again.
Am I dead?
No, we're still alive.
Wow. This is incredible. Wow. This is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen.
See what you've been missing?
Yeah.
All right, Blue, you're flying. Sort of. Not really, but do you feel it?
Yes. I do feel it.
No, Blue!
Ay, caramba.
Sorry. We're gonna die!
You did not feel it in here.
You think?
Never send a monkey to do a bird's job.
Don't worry. I got it.
There he goes. That's my boy.
Ooh, is it hot? I think I'm sweating. I didn't even think that was biologically possible, and yet, look.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's your boy, all right. Okay, so he needs a little help.
When I saw your face,
Wow. What a beautiful sunset.
Yeah.
Lou, down here. Just tell her you have beautiful eyes.
That's good. Great idea. I have beautiful eyes.
Yeah, okay, sure. They're nice.
No, her eyes. Her eyes.
Oh, right. Yeah. Your eyes. Your eyes are great. Not mine. I mean, mine are okay, but yours, I bet you can see right through them.
Lou, just tell her how you feel.
Jewel,
Yeah?
I've been wanting to tell you that I.
How sweet. You're getting choked up. Oh, you're choking! Okay, all right. Come on, you got it.
Much
Stay
more
with me, Blue.
and-
One more, come on. One more time.
Yep, that's my boy. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Luis's Garage.
After you.
No, you
Oh,
first.
please, I insist.
Okay. Yeah. Guess this is it.
Yeah. Quiet and adventure.
End of the line.
Ah, yes.
Guess things like this don't happen in Tiny Soda.
Tiny soda. Oh, wait, mini soda?
Yeah.
Ah, that's very good. That's
Right.
very funny, actually.
Howdy, how's it going? Thanks for joining me. My name's Zav, and today I'm reviewing the 2011 animated movie Rio, which happens to be my favorite animated movie, and probably no coinky dink. As you can see, my channel name is Bird Fari, and I call myself an amateur bird nerd. Of course, there are many people who know a lot more about birds than I do, but I guess I would know more about birds than the average Joe Blow on the street. And this movie is wonderful, even if you're not a bird nerd. It's a great adventure story, it's a great romance, it's a great comedy, visually stunning. If you're interested in Rio de Janeiro, this movie really highlights the city and all its beautiful architecture and stunning natural beauty. So, yeah, I really love this movie. By far my favorite animated movie. And it was created by Blue Sky Studios. Unfortunately, Blue Sky Studios was shut down by Disney. So Disney purchased 20th Century Fox. Blue Sky Studios was a subsidiary of 20th Century Fox. And so Disney acquired them in 2019. But then they closed down the Blue Sky Studios department in 2021. They said due to COVID. So, whatever. I mean, it's just disappointing that, generally speaking, I think competition is a good thing. Monopolies are not a good thing. And so it's been sad to see Disney slowly but surely monopolize the competition. They bought out Marvel many years ago. They bought out Lucasfilm. So the Star Wars movies have been, the ones made by Disney have been quite disappointing. And also the Indiana Jones. I talked about Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom in my last review. But the Dial of Destiny, which came out 2 years ago, made by Lucasfilm through Disney, that was a bit of a disappointment. Disney's made some good movies, so not all bad, but my point is that it is sad that Disney's managed to monopolize the competition and, in the case of Blue Sky Studios, shut them down. So, yeah, we had Pixar, we had Blue Sky Studios, and we had Disney all creating great animated movies through the early 2010s. I am surprised there haven't been more movies about birds. Of course, birds have appeared in many movies, but they're usually like side characters or comic relief. Like there's a hornbill in The Lion King. There's a parrot or a macaw lago in Aladdin. But again, they're usually just side characters, not the focus. So there have been a few movies about penguins. So there was Happy Feet and Surf's Up. They came out around the same time. Coincidentally, the original idea for Rio was actually based around a penguin that got washed up in Panama. So generally, penguins, they don't live in the tropic zones, but that would have been a completely different story. But wisely, the writers, producers who pitched the idea to Blue Sky Studios, they realized that there were too many penguin movies. Well, this is around the time that Happy Feet and Surf's Up came out, so they didn't do that. So yeah, there have been a few animated penguin movies, and yeah, several animated movies that have had birds in them. I'm thinking next time I might review The Rescuers Down Under, and The Rescuers Down Under, the protagonists are, mice, but there is a spectacular eagle that appears in that story, but not one of the main characters. So according to some research I read, don't quote me on this, but apparently the most common dream, or one of the most common dreams that humans have, is about flying. We wish we could fly, and no wonder humans figured out how to make airplanes and hang gliders, helicopters, and no wonder in so many movies you have various people flying and other animals flying. So of course superhero movies, Superman, all these superheroes can fly, Iron Man, whether it's with a jet engine pack or whether it's just an innate skill. So superheroes are usually able to fly, and you usually have flying creatures in whether it's dragons in Harry Potter, or fantastic beasts, like Phoenix Bird, or Avatar. I forgot what those flying creatures were in Avatar. I just recently watched Jurassic World Rebirth. You got the pterodactyl creatures. So flying, whether it's in an airplane or it's a dragon, dinosaur, other fictional creature, flying is such a big part of our dreams and our sense of adventure. And yet, there are very, very few movies I can think of where they focus on birds that can fly. I mean, really, Rio and Rio 2, so there was a sequel that came out in 2014. These are the two that come to mind. Maybe after I finish this video I'll think of another one, but it does amaze me that there haven't been more movies about birds, and especially like animated movies, considering there have been so many animated movies based on other animals. And yeah, the fact that they're often side characters or whatever shows you that people love birds, but I guess it's too challenging to write characters to make them the protagonists, or it's too I don't know why there haven't been more. I mean, I don't know. For example, there's never been a movie about cockatoos that I can think of. There's a antagonist villain cockatoo, Nigel, in Rio, but I can't think of any animated cockatoo movies. That seems like a no-brainer. So come on, Disney, now that you've bought out Pixar, you've bought out Blue Sky Studios, and you've closed them down, you basically totally dominate the market. Come on, Disney, please make more animated movies focusing on birds. And another reason I love this movie is I think this is the kind of movie that would get kids and adults, but especially kids, excited about conservation, excited about birds, excited about animals in general, and excited about, making sure that we, as guardians of the planet, I mean, for better or worse, humans have a huge impact on the earth. Of course, a comet could come and destroy all living things on earth, but as it stands now, it's obvious that humans are having a huge impact on the earth, and we have the power to, make species go extinct, or maybe to bring them back from extinction. I'm not sure. I mean, you're always reading stories that they want to bring back the dodo, or Peter Jackson, the director of Lord of the Rings and King Kong remake. Peter Jackson, his latest project is he wants to bring back the moa. The moa is like a 3-meter bird that, almost double the size of an emu, that roamed New Zealand until 700 years ago or so, 800 years ago. They went extinct. A lot of animals went extinct because of, European expansion, colonialism. But in the case of the moa, it actually went extinct before Europeans arrived in New Zealand. That was due to the Maori, Polynesians, Pacific Islanders spreading out, and surprisingly, it took them a long time to reach New Zealand. So they reached, Hawaii and other far-flung islands across the Pacific before they reached New Zealand. So New Zealand was, an Eden for birds up until about 800 or 900 years ago. Within a century of arriving, the Maori had caused the moa to go extinct. Even though they were 3-meter birds, they were, herbivores, and they were pretty clueless, naive when it came to predators. The only predator that the moa knew was the Haas-eagle, and the Haas-eagle looked a bit like a harpy eagle, but even bigger. So the Haas-eagle was the largest living eagle in, modern history. And they went extinct around the same time as the moa, because the Haas-eagle main prey was the moa. So both the world's largest bird and the world's largest flying bird, the Haas-eagle, and the world's largest flightless bird, the moa, they went extinct around the same time. But when moa first encountered humans, they had no idea what they're up against, and so the Maori could easily, just strangle them or throw a spear and kill them quite easily, despite their massive size. My point there was that, it's possible that, probably likely that humans will be able to bring back some extinct species, but it's very, very difficult. They've been talking about bringing back the dodo for decades, and the Tasmanian tiger or the thylacine, Tasmanian wolf, that's been talked about for, 30 years or whatever. So I'll see it when I'll believe it when I see it. Of course, if you decimate a species too much, then you have the problem of the lack of biodiversity. So from what I understand, the Spix's macaw, which is the focus of Rio, the current population, it's mostly in captivity. They have various breeding facilities. The main one seems to be in Germany for some reason. It doesn't really make sense why Germany, because Germany's quite cold, and the Spix's macaw is from Brazil. Brazil, basically on the equator, so a tropical region. I mean, apparently they are sending many of the Spix's macaws that are being bred in Germany back to Brazil, but anyway, apparently most of the population, which are mostly in captivity and currently mostly in Germany, they all originate from 7 birds. So again, don't quote me on that. This is just reading a couple of articles online and Wikipedia, so that information could be incorrect, but if so, then their genetic diversity is much worse than the California condor. So, as I said, the California condor was down to just 22 birds, but they've managed to have an incredible comeback, and now they're breeding in the wild again. They're in the Grand Canyon. I mean, they reintroduced them to the Grand Canyon after several centuries not being there, and California, even part of Mexico, Baja California, they're breeding in the mountains there. So that's truly remarkable. That program has taken decades and cost tens of millions of dollars, and with the best technology that all these birding associations in America and donations and government assistance. So that's like the most remarkable story I can think of. I'll get into the details on the Spix's macaw recovery program a bit later. Firstly, I want to focus on the movie, because basically this video is the reviewing Rio. So the story of Rio was co-written by Carlos Saldanha, Earl Ritchie Jones, and Todd Jones. And the movie was directed by Carlos Saldanha, and he is Brazilian. He's from Rio de Janeiro, so this was a very personal project to him. He was also the director of the Ice Age movies, Ice Age The Meltdown, 2006, Ice Age Dawn of the Dinosaurs, and Robots, Harold and the Purple Crayon, that was his last movie, Ferdinand. But yeah, as I said, because he's from Rio de Janeiro, this story was very personal to him. So he was the co-writer and he was the director. So just looking at the production story, the production history, he first had the idea for Rio in 2005. So that was, basically 6 years in the making, from 2005 to 2011 when they finally got it done. But originally the idea was a penguin washed up on the beaches of Ipanema. It was changed to the current story after he learned of Happy Feet and Surf's Up. So yeah, he realized that basically too many penguin movies coming out around the same time. So then he pitched the idea to Chris Wedge at Blue Sky in 2006. Saldanha showed the animators maps and books with geographic landmarks and measurements, from which they built a digital version of Rio. Later, a group of artists from the company visited Rio to see the various story locations. The animators also met with an expert on macaws at the Bronx Zoo to gain insight into their movement and personalities. Saldanha himself is a Brazilian from Rio de Janeiro. Such elements of Brazilian culture and landmarks were also influenced from Saldanha growing up in Brazil. Okie dokie. The lead voice actors were approached in 2009. Jermaine Clement, interestingly, he was the first one approached. He plays Nigel, the sulfur-crested cockatoo, the villain, antagonist, very evil cockatoo. Jermaine Clement was approached to do the film after seeing test shots of his character Nigel doing a speech from Flight of the Conchords, which was done prior to the script being finalized. So Jermaine Clement was on board even before they'd finished the story to Rio. Then Neil Patrick Harris was supposed to voice Blue, but had other commitments outside production. Neil Patrick Harris was meant to have the part that eventually went to Jesse Eisenberg. So yeah, he was replaced by Eisenberg, and he was asked to do the voice of Blue during filming of The Social Network, which is probably Eisenberg's most famous movie. The Social Network, it's loosely based around Facebook, and so he's playing Mark Zuckerberg, and that was a David Fincher movie. It won a bunch of awards, and that movie made many people hate Facebook and hate Zuckerberg. Of course, that movie came out in 2010, but Jesse Eisenberg, incredible job in that. Okay, so he was voicing Blue on weekends during filming of The Social Network. Wow, he had a busy schedule then. And he agreed after reading the script, saying it was the perfect antidote to get rid of the mindset of my character in Social Network, the character being Mark Zuckerberg, who was so severe and in some ways so joyless. That's funny. So he went from filming weekdays, playing Zuckerberg in The Social Network, and then weekends he was voicing Blue in Rio. So yeah, I guess this was kind of medicine for him to overcome the joylessness of being Zuckerberg. But of course, character of Blue and the story of Rio, incredibly joyful. For music, they brought on board Sergio Mendes to act as a music guru and online living library. He in turn was able to reach out to artists such as will.i.am and Carl Enos Brown to provide music for the film. Eisenberg and Anne Hathaway, they don't say when Anne Hathaway was brought on board, but I guess this was after Eisenberg. Anne Hathaway, who voiced Jewel, so she's the love interest. Yeah, Eisenberg and Anne Hathaway had acted together before when both were still teenagers, when they played siblings in the short-lived 1999 TV show Get Real. Jesse Eisenberg's most well-known role would be playing Mark Zuckerberg in The Social Network, because that movie got so much attention, and Zuckerberg went on to become one of the richest men in the world. Of course, Facebook is losing a lot of its popularity nowadays. Like younger generations hardly seem to use it. But he was, very savvy to purchase Instagram, and Instagram is still a big deal, and also WhatsApp. So Zuckerberg still very much talked about, and Jesse Eisenberg, he's had an incredible career, but started opposite Anne Hathaway. Anne Hathaway, she's had an incredible career. Both of them big stars. I'm just thinking other movies that of Jesse Eisenberg, of course, Zombieland, that's kind of a comedy. They had a sequel to that as well. Recently he's been directing movies. He directed a movie last year that won some Academy Awards. And then of course Anne Hathaway won Academy Award for Les Miserables. And like her, most people first saw her in The Princess Diaries. That was like her breakout movie role. I've enjoyed Jesse Eisenberg's work and Anne Hathaway's work. I've seen more movies that Anne Hathaway's been in. So yeah, Get Smart. I love Get Smart. That was a great one. I thought recently she's been leaning more into like villain roles. There was a thing that happened, like she was way overexposed, and she hosted the Oscars one year with James Franco, I think it was, and then there's a lot of backlash against Anne Hathaway. Yeah, I think it's been wise of Anne Hathaway to lean into villain roles in recent years, because there was that backlash several years ago about her being, too perfect, obviously a bit of sarcasm there that, people thought she was a bit fake. So yeah, she played a witch in The Witches. That was a movie directed by Robert Zemeckis. That was quite good. And in Ocean's 8, that was like a spin-off of, Ocean's 11, that starring several, well-known actresses: Sandra Bullock, Cate Blanchett, Anne Hathaway, Sarah Paulson, Awkwafina, Rihanna, Helen Bonham Carter. She kind of played a bit of a bitchy character in that one. So that was kind of savvy of her. I can't say that I'm a big fan of Anne Hathaway's, but I have enjoyed her in several movies, and she's obviously very talented. She's obviously very attractive. In Rio, she doesn't show her face, so she doesn't get to trade off her looks. It's all about the voice. That's why I'm actually really impressed with her work in Rio, because it's a different skill when you only have your voice to rely on. It's kind of like radio people. They often say like radio people, that a face for radio, meaning that they're not good. They don't have the looks to be on TV or whatever. But yeah, with voice acting, it's all about the voice. So Anne Hathaway, very funny, very great banter between her and Blue. Great romance. Of course, most of the lines are written for her. In the interviews, Jesse Eisenberg, he talked about improvising. I don't know if Anne Hathaway improvised. There's probably some lines that she did improvise, but I gather that Jesse Eisenberg, he improvised more. At least that's what he said. And he has a very distinctive voice. Very nerdy, socially awkward. Neurotic kind of a Woody Allen. Anxious character, very humorous, and so he plays he's an underdog for several reasons other than ones I just stated. He's a bird who can't fly, a macaw that can't fly. I can say I gained more respect for Jesse Eisenberg and Anne Hathaway after rewatching Rio. I rewatched Rio in preparation for this, and they were perfect. That's inspired casting. Of course, if they, it's. I think people take for granted how talented the voice actors are, and so the standouts in this movie, definitely Eisenberg as Blue, definitely Hathaway as Jewel. So reading through the voice cast, Anne Hathaway as Jewel, she gets top billing, which I feel like Jesse Eisenberg as Blue should have got top billing, since Blue is more the protagonist. I mean, the story starts with him and inspired by a true story. I'll get onto that later, but yeah, okay, it's understandable. You know, to sell a movie, you need big names. And, you know, often they get big name actors and actresses, and sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. But in this movie, definitely it works. I guess Anne Hathaway was the biggest star because, you know, she had been in The Devil Wears Prada, which came out 2006, so 5 years prior to this, and Princess Diaries. Jesse Eisenberg as Blue. So the main two movies that he'd been known for were Zombieland and The Social Network. I think Zombieland was 2009 and The Social Network 2010. So he was also a star on the rise, but Anne Hathaway better known. So yeah, Jesse Eisenberg as Blue. They spell Blue B-L-U. And so Blue is Spix McCaw, who was born in Rio de Janeiro but raised in Moose Lake, Minnesota, after he was smuggled and never learned to fly. Then Leslie Mann as Linda Gunderson, as Blue's owner. So she's the main, you know, human character in the story. And Rodrigo Santoro plays Tulio Monteiro, a Brazilian ornithologist. And Will.i.am as Pedro. He's a red-crested cardinal. Will.i.am from Black Eyed Peas, and Jamie Foxx as Nico, a yellow canary. So Pedro and Nico, these are like you know, Abbott and Costello kind of comedy combination. Some fun banter between them. I have to say, there were some times when these characters annoy me a little bit, even though I love the movie and most of the dialogue I love. I felt like, you know, the movie's got so much comedy anyway that occasionally Pedro and Nico just took me out of the story a little bit. I mean, it slightly annoyed me, but big fan of Jamie Foxx, you know, Django Unchained, incredible movie, and Jamie Foxx has been in I mean, he's so talented. He can sing, he can do sketch comedy, he's great at impressions, action movies, comedies, you name it. Jamie Foxx, he's very humorous on talk shows. Will.i.am, I mean, I like some Black Eyed Peas music, but I guess he helped out with the music, so maybe that was part of the deal, that he got a speaking role for helping out with the music as well. But yeah, these two, if there's a weak link in the story, I would say maybe Pedro Nico, and not just the voices, also visually, because, you know, the Nico's character, he's got this beer bottle can on his head, and the Pedro character, the red-crested cardinal, very overweight and looks like this bird couldn't possibly fly. So as an amateur bird nerd, that annoyed me slightly. But I think, you know, these characters might be beloved by many other people. So comedy is all about personal taste, of course. I thought there was plenty enough comedy in this movie without the Pedro and Nico characters. And maybe if they hadn't talked so much, then I might not have minded as much. George Lopez as Raphael. George Lopez, he had his own talk show for many, many years. And I've seen him in some other things like Valentine's Day, and he's also very entertaining, both as an interviewer and interviewee. So yeah, he did a good job as a energetic Toko Toucan. And then you have Tracy Morgan as Louise, a bulldog who is Raphael's friend and a saw expert who has a medical condition of drooling. I mean, of course, bulldogs do tend to drool a lot. So George Lopez, Tracy Morgan, they were great. Jermaine Clement as Nigel, yeah, he was definitely a standout, and no wonder they used him a lot in the sequel. I'm not a big fan of the sequel. I thought the story in Rio 2 was a little bit weak, but I'm not going to talk too much about the sequel this time. But yeah, the Nigel as the sadistic sulphur-crested cockatoo used to be a film and TV star, but was replaced by a parakeet, causing him to develop a strong hatred for pretty birds. So basically, jilted, a has-been, a resentful has-been who's angry about other birds getting all the attention because his best days are over. But actually, you could say that Nigel, the cockatoo, steals the show. Jermaine Clement, his breakout was in Flight of the Conchords. That was a great New Zealand TV show that had a cult following on HBO, and he's done a lot of voice acting, many famous animated movies. He's incredible. When I first saw Rio, many years ago, 14 years ago, I thought, why did they choose a New Zealand actor to voice an Australian cockatoo? But who cares? They went with the talent, and I think to many Americans and British and Canadians and Europeans, they probably couldn't tell the difference between an Australian accent and a New Zealand accent. But as an Australian, I don't know if you can tell my accent. As an Australian, I thought it was odd that they chose a New Zealand actor to voice an Australian cockatoo living in Brazil. But in hindsight, that was silly because, with movies, you go with the talent. And Jermaine Clement, incredibly talented, so funny. And you could say like his musical number in both Rio and Rio 2 kind of steal the show. Even though I'm not a big fan of Rio 2, I did love Nigel's musical number there, I Will Survive. And he's just amazing. So, a great villain. Very, very funny. Who else? You have Jake T. Austin. He plays Fernando, young boy, like orphan boy. Carlos Ponce as Marcel, Nigel's owner and a leader of a group of exotic bird smugglers. Davi Vieira, one of Marcel's henchmen. Okay, so you have Davi Vieira as Armando and Jeff Garcia as Tipa. So these are the two henchmen. They're also kind of comic relief because they're kind of bumbling buffoons. Then you have Jane Lynch as Alice, a Canadian goose. So she's a very, very famous actress, and she was in Glee, and she's been in Only Murders in the Building. She's been Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. She's been in so many movies, so many TV shows, but her character is very, very minor. Just the beginning of the movie as a Canadian goose who's mocking Blue through the window of Linda's bookstore. From now, I'll read the plot. So, spoiler alert. I think, pretty sure anybody watching this has already watched Rio and just curious to hear someone else's take. So this is a fairly long video. I don't know how to do short videos. I like to go somewhat in depth. But I'm going to read the plot, and reading the plot helps me to stay somewhat focused, but also I have seen, I watched a few other reviews on YouTube, and I've read some on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, and most people have praised Rio visually. I think everyone is impressed how this movie looks spectacular. Rio, the city looks spectacular. The birds, the morcos, the toucans, the cockatoo, all looks amazing. Carnival. But some people have criticized the story. People say, well, it's a forgettable story. So I don't think so. I think it's a great story. And as I said, partly inspired by true events. I'll get to that later. In Moose Lake, Minnesota, a crate containing an orphan male Spix's macaw hatchling that was smuggled out of Brazil falls from a truck and is found by Linda Gunderson, who names him Blue. 15 years later, Blue is highly domesticated but has never learned to fly. One day, ornithologist Tulio Monteiro invites Blue and Linda to Rio de Janeiro, for Blue, the last known male of his species, to mate with the last known female. At Tullio's aviary in Rio, Blue meets his prospective mate, the fiercely independent Jewel, who longs to flee back into the wilderness. Later that night, while Linda and Tullio are at a restaurant, the Morcors are captured by an orphan boy named Fernando and a self-crested cockatoo named Nigel, both of whom work for a gang of bird smugglers led by Marcel, who wants to leave the country to sell Blue and Jewel on the black market. While Fernando regrets his actions, Nigel tells the Macaws of his disdain for pretty birds after he was replaced by a parakeet on a television series. Blue's familiarity with cages allows him and Jewel to escape, alerting Nigel and the smugglers to give chase. The Morcors are forced to travel on foot. Marcel had leg cuffs applied to the two of them. Fernando helps Linda and Tullio search for the Morcors the next morning, while Blue and Jewel meet the Toko toucan Raphael, whose bulldog friend Louise will remove their cuffs. Raphael unsuccessfully tries teaching Blue to fly from the edge of a tall mountain with Jewel. They soon catch up with red-crested Cardinal Pedro and his yellow canary friend Nico, both of whom Blue had met the day before. Elsewhere, Nigel coerces a horde of thieving marmosets led by Mauro to capture Blue and Jewel. To help Blue and Jewel get along better, Pedro, Nico, and Raphael take the Macaws to a samba dance party, where they begin to fall in love. The marmosets arrive, and after a brief fight breaks out, the five escape on a tram. At the smugglers' hideout, Fernando, Linda, and Tullio discovers the Morcors are gone. Fernando gets Marcel's henchmen, Armando and Tipa, to reveal that they will use the Rio Carnival parade to smuggle the birds to the abandoned airport. Blue and the others meet Louise, whose saliva allows Blue and Jewel to slip out of their cuffs. Once released, Jewel flies happily into the sky and the others while Blue leaves, assuming he would only hold Jewel and the others back. Nigel captures Jewel, prompting Blue, Raphael, Nico and Pedro to rush to the parade to rescue her, only to also be captured. Elsewhere, Linda and Tullio pose as dancers in Spix's macaw costumes to access the parade. The smugglers escape and flee to their plane, using a fire extinguisher. Blue breaks out of his cage and quickly frees Jewel and the other birds, but Nigel attacks the macaws and Jewel's wing is badly injured in the process. Blue activates the fire extinguisher, sending Nigel out of the open cargo door and onto one of the engines. The smugglers escape the rapidly descending plane while Jewel falls out of the open cargo hatch. Blue jumps after her, intent on not leaving her behind. After Jewel kisses Blue, he finally gains his flying abilities, and he carries her to Linda and Tullio. Now a couple, Linda and Tullio adopt Fernando and start a bird sanctuary and a bookstore branch in Rio. Blue and Jewel raise 3 hatchlings together and celebrate with their friends. Meanwhile, the featherless Nigel survives the plane crash and is ridiculed by Mauro, while the smugglers are jailed for their crimes. So yeah, for an animated movie, I think it has a great plot, and partly I think it's a great plot because there's a mix of, it's mostly fiction, but there is an element of truth in this story, which I'll get to shortly. I love great love stories. I love adventure. Yeah, this movie works if you're into adventure. I love comedies. Basically, Rio has everything. Friendship, romantic love, you got the human and animal interaction. You have a human love story, you have animal love story. There's like the love story with Rio, because as I said, the director from Rio de Janeiro, and this is like his love letter to his hometown. Some of these locations, I think they should do this more. Hong Kong would be an amazing backdrop for an animal story. Hong Kong is, even though it's full of skyscrapers and kind of like a Blade Runner-esque cityscape, it's also surrounded by green mountains. Victoria's Peak is this amazing green mountain, and the whole Hong Kong island is just, mostly green mountains. They actually have cockatoos in Hong Kong. They're not native. They're cockatoos that escaped from captivity, and in their native habitat in Indonesia, they look like sulfur-crested cockatoos, but they're actually not. There's a different cockatoo that's from Indonesia. In their native Indonesian islands, they're listed as highly endangered, but there is a feral population or escape population that's breeding in Hong Kong. That would make an amazing story for an animated movie. So I just don't understand why there aren't more movies like this. And, Rio was very successful financially. Even though when Rio came out, it was released by Blue Sky Studios under the Fox, 20th Century Fox Animated Studios banner, and it made $485 million. The sequel made $495 million. So the two Rio movies made just under $1 billion. So combined the two movies, and the budget on the first movie was $80 million. I think the budget on the second was $100 million. So both movies incredibly profitable. And yet we haven't had another Rio movie since 2014. So it's now 2025, 11 years later. I have read reports that they are in the early works to make another movie. They better hurry up. I mean, Anne Hathaway and Jesse Eisenberg, they're not that old. I think they're in their 40s, early 40s. But, as you get older, your voice does change. This is one of the criticisms with Harrison Ford in The Dial of Destiny. So, Harrison Ford, he's now in his 80s. I think he's 83 now. He was 81 when The Dial of Destiny came out. But at the beginning of that movie, you have a de-aged Harrison Ford, because they've got this, incredible technology where they can make you look much younger with CGI, and, it's done pretty well. But a big complaint about Dial of Destiny, one of the complaints was that they're using Harrison Ford's 80-year-old voice, and he doesn't sound like he did when he was 40. So, okay, Jesse Eisenberg and Anne Hathaway, they're not that old. They could still do it, but it has been 11 years since Rio 2, and it's been 14 years since the original. So, come on, Disney. You greedily monopolize the animation studio industry in America. And so if you're going to own all these properties, make the most of it. You've got the money. And, it's amazing to me that these movies were so profitable. As I said, combined, the two movies made close to $1 billion. And with the power of, Disney, Disney's with their marketing power, with, Disneyland, Disney World, you've got Disneyland in Tokyo, Disney Sea, you've got Disney Shanghai, Disney Hong Kong, Euro Disney. So you've got all these Disneylands around the world. They could totally have, a theme ride based around Rio. And I mean, I haven't been to Disney World in Florida. Maybe they do as part of Animal Kingdom. But it seems like a no-brainer. I mean, you've got Rio de Janeiro, the backdrop, that you could have like a, recreated Sugarloaf Mountain, recreated Christ the Redeemer statue, recreated, aqueducts and tram line and miniature carnival or something with the birds. It just seems like it would be a marketing dream, especially now that Disney owns all that. So I hope the rumors are true. But I mean, I've been reading these rumors for 5 years or so. So, and in the meantime, Disney closed down Blue Sky Studios 4 years ago. So yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. Just like I'll believe it when I see it when people talk about bringing back the dodo from extinction, or Peter Jackson talking about bringing back the moa. I don't think it's necessary to bring back extinct animals. I just hope that humans are smart enough to keep what we've got. So don't lose any more species, not on my watch. So I'm thankful that the California Condor program seems to be going pretty well. Incredible that was down to 22 birds, and I'm grateful that the Spix's Macaw program seems to be gaining momentum, and partly thanks to the success of this movie. So when Rio came out in 2011, this got a lot more people interested in birds, in specifically Spix's macaw. About the story, I mean, I read the plot, so sounds like a great plot to me. I mean, okay, is it the greatest story ever? No, but for a family animated movie where you have talking animals, what more do you want? I think it's great. So it has a 6.9 on IMDb, so it's rated reasonably highly, but I think it's better than that. There are other animated movies, Toy Story and Ice Age and Aladdin, Little Mermaid, all these movies, Beauty and the Beast, that are rated much higher. I think Moana, the first Moana anyway, is rated higher. I would. I think it's a 9 out of 10. I mean, it's very hard to be objective. Even for me, it's not a perfect movie. I do have criticisms. The sequel was rated 6.3. I do think the sequel is a weaker movie, story-wise not as good, visually not as good. But I'm not going to talk too much about the sequel. It is interesting though that the sequel made more money. So even though the consensus is generally that the sequel wasn't as good, and yet it made more money, I think that's basically the goodwill that was created from the first Rio. Also maybe partly the timing, because the sequel came out in 2014. That was the same year that you had the World Cup soccer. 2014, that was clever timing for the sequel to be released, because you had the World Cup soccer, which was played in Brazil that year. So that probably helped the movie's success then, even though by most accounts, the sequel wasn't as good. I was living in China in 2014, English teacher, and I was teaching these university classes, and one of the homework assignments was to do a movie review. I asked the students to talk on camera for 5 minutes, so not as long as this review, but anyway, one of my students, he reviewed Rio 2, and he was a big, soccer fan. I mean, I haven't seen him many years, but he loved soccer, he loved Brazil, and he loved birds too. And he said that Rio 2 was a better movie, but I think he was kind of getting lost in the hype. But just coincidentally, I was trying to study Chinese. So I lived in China for 3 years, 2012 to 2015. And Rio was very popular in China. I saw, at the time, 2014, I saw a lot of Rio merchandise in toy stores and bookshops. So I purchased this, and I bought this to try and learn how to read Chinese. I mean, I had other books to learn how to read Chinese. So this had the, had the Chinese characters, but also the pinyin. And I tried to read a little bit, but in the end, it was just too difficult. But I've held on to this and still holding out hope that someday I'll be able to speak Chinese. I do speak a bit of Japanese. I mean, I've lived in Japan many, many years, so I think Japanese is actually an easier language than Chinese. Chinese, they have different tones. Very, very difficult for me. I do relate somewhat to the character of Blue, Jesse Eisenberg's character, because he's socially awkward, and he just talks too much. He can't find the right moment to start a conversation or end a conversation, just like I can't find the right moment to know when to end a review like this, and I go off on too many tangents. I love that the story is, basically at the beginning of the movie, Jewel is the confident one, and Blue's, because he can't fly, and he's a fish out of water because he's been taken from, snowy Minnesota to tropical equatorial Rio de Janeiro, and she's a quick talker, he's slower, and she's a little bit arrogant, I guess, but super confident. She's all about freedom, and he wants to go back to being taken care of by humans, so she's more proactive. He's a bit more cowardly, and he's less confident. And so I like how the love story evolves. He's more interested from the moment he sees her. He thinks that she's an angel, and then she basically attacks him because she's very aggressive and she just wants to escape. But later they gradually fall in love, and there's this big argument when they're finally released. So when Louise manages to free them, and she's flying up, and finally she can taste freedom after years being locked up or whatever. And Blue sees her up there, and then he gets depressed because he realizes that he can't join her, and then he starts making up excuses, and he's kind of angry. He's kind of projecting onto her his anger, his lack of confidence in himself. But yeah, I thought that was clever writing. You think, oh no, it should be this happy ending, but then there's a twist. So just when they're finally free, because of his Achilles heel, the fact that he's a bird with wings who can't fly, and the bird he loves, Jewel, is all about flying and all about freedom and all about returning to the wild. But then shortly after that, she is caught by Nigel, the sadistic cockatoo, and in the climatic moments throughout the movie, Blue is trying to be braver, even though he's cowardly and he's lacking confidence. I like the fact, he goes for it. So he tries to kiss Jewel when he gets his chance, and he doesn't hold back. And yeah, he tries to be romantic, but he can't get the timing right, and there's a lot of awkward conversations. It's kind of like, when people first fall in love. I mean, nowadays you have I guess dating apps or whatever. I mean, all that's crazy. I think that's not really good for humanity. For thousands of years, I don't know, for a long time, this is the way romance worked, that boy meets girl, they fall in love, and there's awkwardness, and so it seems like a very organic relationship. And yeah, he goes for it, but then because he kind of fails, he fails to fly, but he also fails trying to impress Jewel. And this is how it is for many people, especially even though Jewel is a very, very confident, character. It is kind of Blue who makes the first move, and he's interested in her before she's interested in him. So again, this is like how a lot of relationships start. And even though now you have a lot of these independent and strong feminist kind of women, they still talk about that they want men to make the first move. So I think this is like a great romantic story that rings true. And obviously there's an environmental message in the movie, but it's not preachy, and it's not, I don't really like the term woke because it's overused, but it doesn't feel unnaturally preachy, whereas a lot of Hollywood movies in recent years, and especially Disney movies, they've felt overly preachy. The message, and yeah, Rio just feels organic. You feel that the people behind it, the director, co-writer from Brazil, he loves the story. Everyone on board seems to really love the story, and the message speaks for itself. Obviously, you have a highly endangered, beautiful birds, and I think that's why the story works so well. It feels really organic. The love story is organic, and the message behind the movie, you don't need to spell it out. It's obvious. And if you're interested in birds, this is one of the best movies. And if you're trying to get people interested, like if you're a parent and you want to get your kids interested in animals or birds, this is a great one. True bird nerds, ornithologists, there's plenty to fault the movie. I mean, I guess there are, very minute details. For example, the parrots or the macaws, when they show the close-ups of their feet, they only have 3 toes, whereas actually parrots and macaws have 4 toes. So that was a minor detail they got wrong. I'm not sure why they the animators drew 3 instead of 4. It is kind of crazy that, Linda, she really, really loves Blue, and, she's got a bookshop, so she's a bookworm, and yet she's totally clueless about how to look after parrots, because she's got Blue eating chocolate chip cookies like every morning, and cocoa, and brushing his teeth, and near all this dangerous cooking equipment. So maybe that aspect of the movie could have been improved, little details. And also Tullio, the ornithologist, he's a bit too hands-on with the birds, like he puts a bird feather in his mouth and not very hygienic. So yeah, there are nitpicks here and there, but overall you really feel that the people behind the movie, they love the movie and they did their best to get it right. Okay, so true story. I just want to read a bit about the actual bird that Blue is based on was named Presley, after Elvis Presley. Okay, so this is an article that came out in 2015, so 10 years ago, and this is on the Audubon website, written by Roberto Caz. I think he's a Brazilian. So here's the story behind the story, the inspiration for the character of Blue in the movie Rio. So in August 2002, Mickey Santo, then a 41-year-old manager of the veterinary clinic in Denver, Colorado, received an anonymous phone call. It was from a lady who lived nearby and claimed to own a Spix's macaw. The woman hoped that Santi, who owned 7 parrots, would know how to return the animal to Brazil, its home country. At first, Santi was skeptical. She was aware that the species was considered extinct in the wild, and she knew there were probably fewer than 100 of the birds left in captivity, none in the United States. But when Santi arrived at the woman's house, she was surprised to find that the medium-sized domestic bird with a bluish-grey head and body was in fact a Spix's macaw. To an astronomer, this would almost be like finding water on Mars. To a physician, like discovering the cure to a disease. To ornithologists, the discovery of an unknown Spix's macaw stoked hope that, just maybe, a remarkable species might not dwindle down to one last bird in a zoo like Martha the passenger pigeon. So Martha was the last known passenger pigeon, and she died in 1914, so 111 years ago. And the cage in which Martha died at Cincinnati Zoo was the coinkydink. This is extraordinary coinkydink, the same cage where the last known Carolina parakeet. So the Carolina parakeet was the only known parrot species to be native to the United States, and that went extinct in 1918, and the last known one being at also Cincinnati Zoo in the same cage, so 4 years apart. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. This is why I get so... this is why I think there should be more animated movies about birds, because, there are sad stories, but also there are so many truth stranger than fiction stories around birds, captive birds and wild birds. I mentioned about the escaped cockatoos in Hong Kong, and the fact that they're incredibly rare in their native habitat. And then you have this very, very sad story about the passenger pigeon and the Carolina parakeet, and the last known species of which both went extinct in the same cage at the same zoo. Unbelievable. But back to the true story behind Presley, named after Elvis Presley. So, Santi had just found what might be the world's lone unaccounted for Spix's macaw. His name was Presley. But by then, Presley had racked up at least 2 decades in hiding. His exact path to Colorado is hard to track, but he was probably born around the São Francisco River in a savanna region that unites Bahia and Pernambuco, 2 states in northeastern Brazil. Captured as a fledgling in the 1970s, he was likely taken by car to Paraguay, where he was sold to a British importer, Gordon Cook, who would later be sentenced to 6 months in prison for animal trafficking. After a likely stopover to change planes in Madrid and a short stint in London, he eventually joined another very young Spix's macaw purchased by a Colorado collector. The collector, probably aware that he was being investigated, gave the birds to a woman who would later call Santi. The fate of the second macaw was unclear. Presley, on the other hand, had been named after the king of rock and roll and received the company of a female green parrot with whom he had set up housekeeping. Santi said that the owners were good people who had children. The birds were part of the family. The lady knew she was owned a rare bird, but she had no idea how rare and precious it was. So remember, this is, before social media was a big thing and before Wikipedia was a big thing. So if, you happen to own a rare bird, it wasn't that easy just to look it up and find out all the details as we can now. But this, true stranger than fiction, absolutely unbelievable. So yeah, this is going back 2002. Presley, who and his companion lived in a relative harmony for about 2 decades until 2012, when the female died. So this is after already Presley has been moved to another owner in Colorado. So yeah, the Presley's mate died. Presley's mate was not Spix's macaw. This is another parrot. Okay, so after Presley's mate died, this caused Presley to sink into a depression. The owner, after seeking help from Santi, eventually signed an agreement with the feds that, in exchange for turning over Presley, she would not be prosecuted. Once informed about the bird, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the World Parrot Trust began to coordinate an effort to return him to Brazil. Since neither organization had an office in Denver, Santi was appointed Presley's guardian. That day, Santi wrote in a diary, "Taking Presley from the home where he lived for 23 years was very difficult. I developed a relationship with him and his family who trusted me. The family said goodbye, knowing that he would be safe." In September 2002, Presley was taken to Mickey Santi's room, where he met his roommate, an African grey parrot named Ricky. We thought he would have the company of a bird. We thought he should have the company of a bird. Lean and moody from his bereavement, Presley was greeted with toys. His favourite was a small stuffed frog and a spray bath to polish his feathers. Santi changed Presley's diet from industrialized food to one rich in seeds, grains, and fruits. And unlike the other 7 birds of the house, he was allowed to walk across the room. Good exercise for him after living for so long in a small cage. On occasion, he did a tour to the tune of Elvis's Blue Suede Shoes. He loved the song, said Santi, who also recorded the bird's own singing and reproduced it in a loop so that he grew accustomed to the sound of his species. The next step was to restore his muscles. Santi left food in different parts of the cage, encouraging Presley to jump from one perch to another. Twice a day, she also exercised his wings, spreading them open and moving them up and down. In time, Presley began to help, receiving pine nuts, his favorite food, in return. After 3 months of training and recovery, a veterinarian at the Denver Zoo determined that Presley was strong enough to make the 20-hour journey to Brazil. In December, Santi and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service agent, George Morrison, flew from Denver to Miami, where they met Brazilian Wildlife Protection Officer Iolita Bampi, a former department head at IBAMA. Presley traveled to Santi's feet in an animal carrier provisioned with pine nuts and stuffed frogs, and Fanti periodically put her fingers inside the crate so he could feel her company. Before handing Presley off to Bampi, she took him in her hands and said farewell. "It was very sad. I cried," she said, "but it was also a good cry because I knew he would meet other birds." Bampi and Presley transferred to another plane, and hours later, after more than 2 decades of involuntarily exile, Presley had returned to his country. We flew straight to Sao Paulo, and once we got there, we drove to the zoo that had experience in dealing with the species, said Bampy. Our expectation was once paired with a female, Presley would mate. After living the domesticated life for so long, Presley weighed less than a pound and showed an obvious fondness for his human handlers. That was an exaggeration, of course. He wasn't, but very, very skinny. But anyway, not that skinny. They gave him a radio for company and dialed it to a news station so he'd have the constant sound of human voices. Oh, wow. So they knew that he'd been so used to the company of human voices that they thought he needed a radio, even when they'd moved him all the way to Brazil. That's a nice touch. I also put a chair in the room to spend time with him, said biologist Fernando Vaz, head of the zoo's aviary. And of course, he had his toys from the United States. Presley was placed in a cage adjacent to that of a Morcor couple, but he remained a bachelor for 2 years. Then, the owner of an aviary in Redcliffe was forced by the government to hand over 4 Spix's macaws he had obtained illegally. One of the macaws, named Flor, had been the first female born in captivity in Brazil. In September 2004, Presley and Flor exchanged their first look. In the beginning, they stayed in separate cages so they could get used to each other. 6 months later, they were united. Any approach with macaws takes time, said Vaz. The first physical contact was anticlimactic, in part because Flor was distracted, constantly looking for her sister, who was squawking in a nearby cage. Things stayed that way for a year until the Permanent Committee for the Recovery of the Spix's Macaw decided that it was too risky for all 7 of the zoo's birds to live in one place. If a disease broke out, they could all die at once. When Presley and Flor were transferred to an aviary overlooking the forest at Limpdom Foundation, a private breeding facility 2 hours from Sao Paulo, something clicked. The two started to act exactly as a couple, said Vaz. They were always in the nest. Between May and August 2006, Flor laid 13 eggs. Unfortunately, all of them were infertile. The committee decided that Flor would be transferred to the Lua Park Foundation in Spain, where she would again fail to produce. Presley, by then in his 3rd decade, would be retired. He would live in a cage with a golden conure named Killer. Despite their difference, one blue, the other yellow, Presley and Killer got along fine until 2013, when Killer died. Presley took it hard, falling into another deep depression. They say parrots, macaws, they need love, whether it's the love from their owner or the love of another bird. If parrots, macaws, cockatoos, if they don't get, sufficient affection, they tend to pull out their feathers. So this is another reason why, people love parrots, is because humans need love, and it's obvious that parrots need love, just as humans fall into depression if we don't have feel the love of others or have someone special in our lives. Likewise with birds. Okay, back to the story. We could not leave him alone, said Winda Witkoff. She and her husband, both Americans living in Brazil, were the main supporters of the Limpdom Foundation. So, after just 3 days, Presley, like a sultan, received yet another bride. The chosen female, a Venetian Amazon, was named Priscilla, in honor of Elvis's wife. Presley seemed to take to her right away, cleaning her feathers and sleeping close to her under the heat lamp. But on June 20, 2014, biologist Patricia Serafani called the vet to tell him that Presley, possibly in his 40s, wasn't looking so good. He had barely eaten for a week, and now he was breathing hard. The next morning, Presley was taken to a hospital where veterinarian Ramiro Diaz and his team put him on oxygen and treated him with medicines for his heart, lungs, and kidneys, along with antibiotics to prevent infection. They wanted to do a closer examination, but Presley appeared too weak to withstand the anesthesia. 4 days later, he was dead. So June 24th, 2014. I think this is about the time the World Cup soccer was just started in Brazil, and so about the time Rio 2 was released in cinemas. So again, incredible coinciding timing. So sort of a sad ending there, but happy ending that the real Blue, actually named Presley, got to go back to Brazil, and he had several girlfriends. He did, mate with another Spix's macaw, her name Flora, but unfortunately their eggs were infertile. Maybe not surprising. Apparently it's only like 20% or less that of Spix's macaws' eggs that are fertile, and part of the reason is the lack of genetic diversity. And so this is the problem when there's too few of a species, it's very, very hard to, there's a word called functionally extinct. If you don't have enough birds, even if the animals are still alive, if there's not enough to sufficiently breed them back up, of course you can't really have an Adam and Eve situation where there's one last male, one last female. And that's part of the slight criticism in Rio the movie, because Rio 2, we find out there's a whole other, colony of Spix's macaws living in this part of the Amazon. But in the first Rio, it's assumed that the last male is Blue and the last female is Jewel. But then if you think about it, they have kids. At the end of the movie, they have, three hatchlings, 3 kids. And then what happens to them? Their kids have kids together, or apparently, it doesn't quite work. So as I said before, what I read is that the current captive population of Spix's macaws was mostly or totally bred from 7 individuals. So very, very low genetic diversity. But back to Presley. So he did have a happy life returning to Brazil, and I don't know why they changed the story. In the movie it's Minnesota, but in actuality he was from Denver, Colorado. But anyway, and I don't know why they changed his name to Blue from Presley. Presley would have been a very cool name. Okay, Blue's easier to remember, I guess, but for fans of Elvis Presley, also an iconic, this is an iconic bird, iconic species. Elvis Presley, an icon of music, so icon. But yeah, happy ending until the end, until 2014, and he lived a long, long age, so in his 40s by that stage, and then his final girlfriend was named Priscilla. So it came full circle. Finally, Elvis came back to Priscilla. But that's the true story. That was the inspiration behind Blue in the movie Rio. So, wow, amazing. I really, really wish more movies like this were made, and this would get people more excited about wildlife. And yeah, in my case, especially birds, I think there should be more bird movies, or more movies, especially animation, perfect, because you want to get kids interested in birds from a young age. There are so many movies about dinosaurs. I enjoyed the Jurassic Park, Jurassic World movies too, but why? If they spent that money on more movies about birds, I think that'd also be incredibly profitable. Just as Rio and Rio 2 made nearly $1 billion, and that's without the power of Disney. That was, Blue Sky Studios, a relatively minor studio which is now defunct. So more bird movies, please. Especially, animation I think is ideal, because if you're using real birds, I do love using real animals, but of course you've got to be very careful. You don't want to make animals suffer or give them stress. And as for getting kids excited, they love talking animals. And parrots can talk. You can teach parrots to talk a bit. African grey parrots are very, very clever, very, very talkative, and some cockatoos very, very talkative. I think macaws are not that talkative. As for cockatoos, sulphur-crested cockatoos, you can teach them various words, but umbrella cockatoos, they're even more talkative and hilarious. So a lot of the cockatoo videos you see on YouTube, they tend to be umbrella cockatoos or white cockatoos. They're from a very, very small island in Indonesia. Very, very rare. They would be another great species to focus a movie around. So at some stage, I intend to do another video talking about the captive breeding program for Spix's macaws now, and I want to do other videos about other birds. That's why my channel is called Birdfari. Until now, I've just done movie reviews. If you love birds like me and you want to help other people understand why birds are so exciting, I think Rio is the best movie to get people excited about birds. And yeah, it's not a masterpiece, but it is an unbelievably beautiful movie. It's a great story. It's a great story inspired by a true story. And I do hope that Disney get their act together, because they have the rights now to this, because they bought out Blue Sky Studio. And even though a lot of those animators and the people that worked on the first Rio movie and the sequel, a lot of those people have, I guess, lost their jobs or moved on to other projects. I do hope that they can get the team back together, definitely get the director back. So, you know, this was his passion project. Definitely need to get back Carlos Saldana, and need to get back the voice actors, of course, Anne Hathaway, Jesse Eisenberg, especially Jermaine Clement. Those three, all great, but get the team back together and hurry up, because it's been too long and time is running out to make another Rio movie, I feel, with the same team, because those actors are getting older and it would be harder to get the voices back to make the story work, I think. But, you know, more cause do live a long time. So Presley lived until his 40s. Other birds can live much longer. I saw a story last year about a cockatoo, an umbrella cockatoo in America that died aged 99. Duster the cockatoo. So yeah, other parrots can live even longer. Duster the cockatoo, umbrella cockatoo, passed away last year, aged 99. Unbelievable. But Presley lived until his 40s, so I guess you could do a Rio 3 that's a decade or more after the previous story. I'm not quite sure where they would take the story. Maybe you could include the tepui, the tepui like Angel Falls, the world's highest waterfalls. The tepui used brilliantly in the movie Up. That's another great animated movie. But there's definitely other stories there. And, maybe Blue and Jewel could help out some other endangered parrot species, or doesn't have to be parrot species, other animal species. That could be a direction to take the series. Okie dokies, I'm blabbering on as usual. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Take it easy. Have a good one. Ciao for now.
Endangered species coming through. Watch out.
Smile. Okay, we're gonna figure this out together.
You must bring Blue to Rio de Janeiro.
We don't shake our tushies in Minnesota.
You belong together.
And it's all about swagger.
You should go to Rio.
There's two stages of the actings, like the voice acting and the voice directing and the animation directing, so to place the voice into the character.
When people come to watch movies, they're really excited about watching the animation and then sort of knowing who's behind the voices.
When you can only rely on your voice and you have to read those lines, the movement of your arms and the facial expressions, you have to connect to the theater.
When I'm directing the actors to perform the script, it's different because I'm not on a beautiful set with makeup and all the artists there, all the actors and the props to interact. I'm in this sound room, empty, just the microphone, the actor, the pages, and myself. And we have to perform. And when I close my eyes, I have to hear that performance and I have to believe that that's the character that I needed to be.
Even more into a certain character, because you have to imagine everything else.
I have such little technical expertise, but so I am just kind of astounded with what they do. That's I guess to animate the movie is such a multi-step process, over the course of years. What I'm doing on it, I could, improvise a line and, just which comes just spontaneously to me, but they have to spend then months animating that, kind of those gestures and those, mouth movements to accommodate something that was at one point spontaneous.
Now I will direct the animators to do actually the physical performance of the voice they just heard. That's when truly the character really then comes to life, And then you're starting to see, for example, the voice of Jesse Eisenberg performed by a parrot.
Jesse Eisenberg, he really for a lot of us, just leapt off the page as the character we've been reading for a couple of years. And he'd fit right into the mold of what you would visualize as you read a script. That's rare.
I would love to go 5 minutes without almost getting killed. Is that too much to ask?
Jesse is the kind of actor that you watch him on the screen and you instantly glued to his image and to the way that he performs.
Carlos encouraged me right off the bat to improvise, which for me and my part in the movie, which is like just the lines, that was really important for me. No, it's not what you think. We're just chained together. It's not what you think. No, we're just chained together.
Oh, no, it's not what you think. We're just, chained together.
A little bit of a nuance on the delivery of the line that he was able to give. It make the character, like, funny, make the character emotional.
Hurry, we gotta help the others.
Lou, you're crazy. What are you doing?
I'm gonna pop this cage open like a soda can.
Anne Hathaway was awesome as Jewel. The way Jewel was supposed to appear in the movies, she's supposed to be sort of feral and wild and free spirit. And I think Anne's energy and her ability to embody that free spirit was evident throughout her performance.
Jewel feels that in order to be true to who she is and to be authentic, she needs to be free. Look, Pet, cages might work for you, but I don't want to belong to anyone.
Vibrant, like, powerful voice, and she always had that for me. And then when I compare her voice with Jessie, it was a great contrast. And she also could sing.
She likes to sing, and I like to sing. She does it in front of other people, though I like to do it in the shower, preferably when no one's home.
Hello, pretty bird. So kind of you to join our little soirée.
Jermaine Clement is the voice of Nigel, the villain, and he's an amazing talent in terms of he brought that character to life.
I'm not interested in your knick-knacks. Your burgled baubles bore me. There are 2 blue macaws out there, and I need your multitude of eyes to help me find them.
When I was thinking about the villain of the movie, I always was thinking about him. There has to be a comedic villain.
Now, Nigel's just generally evil. Any chance he gets to do something horrible to another creature, he'll take. I like acting, but I don't like cameras. So animation's perfect. But actually, they do have a camera. They hide a tiny little camera, but you forget about it, just for reference.
He has a very animated face, and for some expressions, the way he curls his lips or the way his eyebrows, you know, those strange stuff, it's really fun.
I had it all. A TV show, women too. I was tall, over 1'2".
Nigel gets to sing a little, mainly about his evilness, his evility. I should say. Evil ability.
The story of Nigel is like, you know, an ex-soap star that is like, you know, a has-been that like is very embittered by that.
No, Raphael. And Raphael knows everyone.
The character of Raphael represents sort of like the essence of Rio.
I am Raphael, and I am a toucan. And apparently if you eat as many Fruit Loops as I had in my life, eventually you get rewarded by playing a great toucan. King of Carnival, larger than life personality, but he has domesticated himself. He's married, he's got 18 birds, a little bit of a homebody now, but his heart still beats for Carnival.
I wanted the voice to be big, powerful, but at the same time warm.
You think too much. It's not what you think in here, it's what you feel in here.
And I wanted that character to be likable and to be larger than life.
Love is blind, also deaf, because I only hear beauty in her singing.
Rio is such a photogenic city. Like, you have all the contrast. You have the mountains, you have the ocean, you have the forest, the nature. It's like concrete jungle meets the real jungle kind of feel to it being in Rio. So I always thought that was really cool, really, you know, different.
It's also a place that an animated movie hasn't been to before.
And I think it just lends itself to that sort of visually striking kind of backdrop for a story like this.
He was like secondhand. I was born there, raised, so I knew everything. I knew the visuals, I knew the culture, I knew all about the landscape. And I had a crew of like, you know, 300 people, and most of them never been to Brazil. So I grabbed a group of like 6 people, and we went to Rio. And we stayed there for 5 days, and we did the tour of the movie. You know, I had the responsibility of making it as close as possible to what it needs to be, so I don't fall into cliches, onto like things that, you know, that doesn't seem like authentic. I wanted to have authenticity to the project I was making. So I want the locations to be right. I want the vibe of the city to be right.
He actually took a group of us there. It was just amazing, and we really did get a feel for the place.
We flew like blue.
He was really targeting getting them immersed into what was unique about Rio and unique about Brazil as a backdrop for a story.
We went to all the locations so they knew geographically where things would be. Some of them went hand gliding to see how that felt.
I mean, with all this padding, it's got to be safe.
Oh my God.
So I want them to take the experience of being blue in Rio and also capture what they feel is different. So I wanted them to take pictures or make notes or draw something, anything that they felt was different or was unique to their eyes.
And it left them with a completely new, updated, immersive experience of it. So it was highly valuable for them to go and now sketch out in person what they'd been watching as YouTube reference or other videos and photos that Carlos had seen.
And I think that was very helpful because when the week all came back, I had like 6 people that could just disseminate that idea to the crew.
Having them experience that was invaluable for us because then they could go back to their individual disciplines and speak of it from that perspective of, well, when I was there.
Rio is a very vibrant and lively city, and so the director really wanted to make sure he captured that energy and that excitement.
We have the parades, and people spend the whole year preparing for that. There's so many people, they live, you know, for that. Doing costume.
Art direction of each parade, the production design is just unbelievable, and the colors and the textures of things, it's just spectacular.
So it's just amazing. It seems like it's a great party, you know what I mean? Like everybody's dancing and flowers and feathers and things like that.
And Carnival, that's the festivity. That's the biggest party in the world. Gotta check it out.
So getting them there, having them experience that was invaluable for us.
I think we didn't use one single Rio frame, but it really feels that we are there.
When people see the movie who've been to Rio, they say, oh, I know where that is.
That they look for their apartments. Oh, that's my building there. I'm sure a lot of people will be doing that.